In the late 1800s, the European powers engaged in what historians commonly refer to as the Scramble for Africa, a period characterized by intense competition to acquire territories and resources across the African continent. However, amidst this fervor, Russia remained conspicuously aloof from the race for African colonies. Russia's decision to abstain from the scramble can be attributed to a combination of internal challenges and strategic considerations. Domestically, Russia was grappling with profound political, economic, and social upheavals. The late 1800s saw the Russian Empire facing significant political unrest, including revolutionary movements and discontent among various social classes. Economic stagnation further compounded these issues as the country struggled to modernize its economy and address widespread poverty. Social tensions simmered as well, with discontent brewing among peasants, workers, and various ethnic groups within the vast Russian Empire. These internal struggles demanded the attention and resources of the Russian government, leaving little room for overseas expansion ambitions. Geographically, Russia's sheer size and its position relative to Africa posed significant challenges to any potential involvement in the scramble. Unlike its European counterparts, Russia lacked direct access to Africa and faced formidable logistical barriers to establishing a presence on the continent. The vast distances, harsh terrain, and absence of convenient sea routes made any expedition to Africa a daunting prospect for Russian policymakers. Moreover, Russia's strategic priorities lay elsewhere. While European powers vied for African territories, Russia focused on consolidating its control over regions closer to home. Expansion into Central Asia, the Caucasus, and Siberia occupied the Russian government's attention and resources during this period. The vast territories of these regions offered ample opportunities for territorial expansion and resource exploitation, aligning more closely with Russia's immediate strategic interests. In essence, Russia's absence from the scramble for Africa was the result of a combination of internal turmoil, geographical constraints, and strategic priorities. While other European powers sought to carve out colonies on the African continent, Russia's focus remained inward, dealing with its own challenges and pursuing expansion closer to home. This decision shaped Russia's role in the global order of the late 19th century and contributed to the broader narrative of European imperialism in Africa. With limited economic stakes in Africa during that period, Russia didn't have a big presence there. Unlike some other European nations, Russia didn't have many colonies in Asia or the Americas, so it didn't desperately need African resources or markets. This lack of economic interest gave Russia little reason to join the rush for African territories. Besides, Russia had to think about its broader interests in the world. It was more concerned about keeping its power strong in Europe and Asia. Trying to expand into Africa might have spread Russia too thin. Cultural differences also played a role. Russia didn't have the same history of colonialism as other European countries. Its leaders saw the world differently and didn't have the same drive for overseas expansion. Plus, Russia's navy wasn't as strong as some other European navies at the time. This made it hard for Russia to establish a presence in Africa, which often required strong naval power. There was also opposition within Russia to the idea of going after colonies in Africa. Many people in Russia thought the government should focus on fixing problems at home rather than chasing after distant territories. The combination of various factors led to Russia's decision to stay out of the race for African territories during the scramble for Africa. While European powers were busy dividing up the continent, Russia was preoccupied with internal challenges and expansion closer to home. This absence had a significant impact on Russia's relationship with Africa and influenced the continent's history. However, it's worth noting that Russia eventually established diplomatic and economic ties with African nations, gradually increasing its presence on the continent. Political instability was a major hurdle for Russia during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The country faced internal unrest, with revolutionary movements pushing for political and social change. This turmoil diverted attention away from overseas expansion and contributed to Russia's absence from Africa. Geopolitically, Russia prioritized maintaining influence in Europe and Asia. Leaders believed that stretching resources thin by pursuing colonial interests in Africa would weaken Russia's position. Instead, they focused on territorial expansion closer to home. Economically, Russia lacked significant interests in Africa at the time. Unlike its European counterparts, Russia didn't have many colonies elsewhere, reducing the need for African resources or markets. The nation concentrated on developing its own economy, investing in infrastructure and industry to modernize and compete globally. Culturally, Russia's approach differed from other European powers due to its lack of a strong colonial tradition. The country's leaders viewed the world differently, without the same drive for overseas expansion. The difference in cultural perspectives presented a challenge for Russia when considering involvement in African colonial endeavors. Moreover, there was considerable resistance within Russia itself against the notion of pursuing colonial interests on the African continent. Many Russians criticized their leadership, advocating instead for a focus on internal development and improving the welfare of citizens rather than venturing into overseas expansion. The repercussions of Russia's absence from Africa were substantial. While other European nations were dividing and exploiting the continent's resources and people, Russia was engrossed in internal struggles and territorial expansion efforts. Consequently, Russia's connection with Africa remained limited, and the continent's historical narrative was largely influenced by the actions of other European powers. Nevertheless, it's noteworthy that Russia gradually established diplomatic and economic relations with African countries over time, resulting in an increasing presence on the continent. The dynamics of Russia's engagement with Africa have been shaped by historical factors, such as its absence from the scramble for Africa, its communist past, and its ongoing endeavors to extend influence in the region. The historical background of Russia's interaction with Africa presents both opportunities and hurdles as the country aims to enhance its involvement on the continent. Additionally, Russia's engagement in Africa is influenced by geopolitical dynamics, particularly its competition with the United States and China. As these global powers vie for influence in Africa, Russia faces intricate diplomatic and strategic dilemmas to uphold its position in the international arena. Moreover, Russia's engagement in Africa is motivated by economic interests, such as accessing natural resources, expanding markets for Russian products and services, and identifying investment prospects. However, these economic objectives may sometimes clash with Russia's political and strategic priorities, leading to complex decisions and challenges in its dealings with Africa. While Russia endeavors to extend its influence on the continent, it must navigate internal pressures and limitations that could impede its ability to achieve strategic goals. The multifaceted factors that have shaped Russia's relationship with Africa underscore the intricate and interconnected nature of global politics. As Russia endeavors to increase its presence in Africa, it must address a spectrum of economic, political, and strategic challenges, while also considering the interests and aspirations of African nations. The evolving dynamics between Russia and Africa will continue to exert a significant influence on the global landscape in the years ahead, and it will be intriguing to observe how this relationship progresses over time. Russia views Africa as a crucial ally in its efforts to counterbalance the dominance of the United States and other Western nations. This strategic perspective has prompted Russia to cultivate closer relationships with African countries, involving military collaboration, arms trade, and diplomatic solidarity. Moreover, beyond strategic considerations, Russia's engagement with Africa is motivated by economic interests. The continent boasts abundant natural resources like oil, gas, and minerals, which are vital for Russia's energy and industrial sectors. Additionally, Russia seeks to expand its agricultural exports to Africa and foster other forms of economic collaboration, including joint ventures and infrastructure initiatives. Historical ties also shape Russia's engagement with Africa, harking back to the Soviet era. These historical connections add another layer of complexity to the relationship between Russia and African nations, influencing mutual perceptions and interactions. In essence, as Russia continues to forge ties with Africa, the partnership will remain a focal point in the global arena, impacting geopolitical dynamics and economic landscapes worldwide. If you found this video interesting, be sure to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe.